Hi, my name's Nick Best and I'm Managing Director here at Astranti, and I've also recorded 10 hours of tuition videos for you to guide you through passing the operational case study exam. This is just one short clip which focuses on a real student script that the examiner has reviewed and given hints and tips on. This little clip is from the introduction to that guide. So I'll leave you with the clip and then give you a bit more feedback on the whole thing when we get to the end. There's really nothing quite like seeing exactly what it is that the examiner wants from you. It's all very well me saying, right, this is what I think you should do in the exam, but I know if you hear it from the examiner, you'll be a lot more convinced. And what I always aim to do when I'm guiding people towards the exam is to focus them on what it is that the examiners are looking for. And what we've got for you here is a real student script put in for the exam, which the examiner's gone through saying, well, this was good about it, this was not so good about it. So we can really learn what it is that the examiner wants you to do. And that's what I'm going to go through with you. I'm going to go through the script. We're going to look at some of the points that the examiner has made, and we're going to draw out the lessons from that. So you can go away knowing exactly what it is that you've got to do to pass the exam. So here we have it on the screen here, and I think the first thing that it's worth, that I kind of want to go through is, if I just scroll down a little bit, there's a little section as we go down, this introduction section, which summarizes the key things that the examiner thinks are most important to passing this exam. And so this is like a nice little summary of everything you need to do in order to be successful. So let's go through these key elements then. So what's the first thing the examiner thinks is, a clear passing answer will demonstrate various features. Here we go. So the first thing they think is evidence of planning. So the examiner is saying here that the good scripts have been planned, they have been structured, they have been organized. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that your plan is visible to the examiner. In fact, the way I actually recommend that you plan is that you actually plan into your answer script. You don't plan, separately on that separate sheet of laminate that you get in the exam. You plan into the answer. Then you can use your plan as headings to actually build your answer out. So you're not wasting time writing it in one place and then copying that same text into another, therefore saving you time by doing planning. So in actual fact, it's unlikely that many people do their plan on the sort of outside of what you'll see on the screen as well. So they don't have to see it. But how do they know then? How do they know this planning? Well, there's structure, there's focus on the requirements, there's nice clear paragraphs, there's good points being made, and that's what you need to be achieving. So of course I've got a whole of actually 2 videos on planning, or why you must plan and how to go about planning. So please, the examiner is saying that this is really important. Please do watch those, and please do incorporate a planning approach into the first 10 or 15 minutes of each of your questions. Your answer will be better as a result. Okay, a good layout and structure which makes it easy to follow. Typically that means breaking your requirement down so that you're answering the specific requirements, and very often you've got a requirement and it can be split into 2 or 3 parts, and in actual fact you just break it down so that those 3 parts to that one big requirement have all got their own separate sections, and then even within that you can break that down even more. It might be that there's a question such as, well, what are the advantages and disadvantages of outsourcing? Well, what you'll do then is you'll break down into advantages of outsourcing and then disadvantages, 2 clear sections. But even within that, each of the advantages can have their own little section with their own little heading. So you structure it in a way that's going to make it easy for the marker to mark it. And they do like to see these nicely structured scripts. Do watch out, because if you look at the examiner's answers, the funny thing is that the examiner often doesn't follow their own advice. You hear what they're wanting from students, but you look at the examiner's answer and it isn't very well structured and it is quite long paragraphs. So just watch out for that and don't fall into that trap. I always think, in fact, I did say it was actually the management case study examiner at the conference. I had a good chat with him about, why don't they do that? Would they please do that in future, just so that students are not trying to recreate what the examiner's answers look like, because it isn't actually what the examiners want, which is sort of ironic, really. Anyway, so okay, an answer which responds appropriately to the task in the format required. So are you asked to write a report, for instance, in which case you've got an introduction, then you've got your analysis, then you've got your conclusion at the end. Okay, so it's also, and probably more importantly, responds appropriately to the task. In actual fact, I'm coming to this operational case study analysis after having done the strategic case study one and the management case study one. So I've done this one last. What's interesting, what's noticeable in doing all three is that the one thing that all the examiners are saying that makes more difference than absolutely anything else is where people are not answering the question asked. The question is asking one thing and the student is giving a slightly different answer, perhaps the one they want it to be. Perhaps the question is, how would this company go about outsourcing? For instance, if we go along with our outsourcing example, and what the students have done, well, I know what outsourcing is, so I'll tell you what I do. I'll define outsourcing. Oh, and I've learned this list of advantages and disadvantages. Okay, so I will write out my list of advantages, write out my list of disadvantages, and there we go. Actually, that wasn't what the question actually asked you. How do you go about doing it was the question. And of course, some students think, I don't know how you go about doing it. I've got no idea. So actually, I'll tell you everything I know about outsourcing and hope I get a few marks. The problem is that you won't get any marks. And actually what you're much better doing in that instance is thinking, okay, look, I don't know how I'd go about outsourcing, but look, why don't I come up with some ideas? Okay, look, what would I do? Let's imagine I was in an organization and let's say it was my IT department and I was going to outsource it to an external company. They were going to do all my IT for me. What would be my first step? Well, my first step might be to look at possible suppliers. In fact, probably before that, I probably want to actually set out what do I want from my IT? What are my goals and objectives of IT in the business? So I know what it is I'm looking for. Then I will look at some alternative suppliers. Perhaps then I will ask them to send in a tender. Then I will analyse those tenders to see who best meets the actual requirements. And so on and so on. So actually, you just think, like, what would I do? Even if you just put, I need to work out what I need to do, then I need to go and find a good supplier, and I'll analyse the market for various different suppliers. I mean, it's actually no different from if you're going to go out and buy a car, or you're going to go out and buy a new mobile phone or something like that. Actually, you probably consider all the alternatives, and you look at what your needs are, and then you'll weigh it all up, and you'll go online and look at various different people to see who can provide it more cheaply. Actually, it's just what we do day to day. So in a sense, that example is just encouraging you to answer the question no matter what, even if it isn't actually the question you would like it to be. But you won't get marks for things that are off the question. Actually, you might get asked for a mark for defining outsourcing as a starting point. Outsourcing is a kind of almost an introduction. But beyond that, you really have to answer the question to get the marks. Okay, so it responds appropriately to the task and in the required format, the examiner said. Okay, from the perspective of the persona described for the operational case study. So, we've got a link there. In my video on the role that you're playing, of course, I go through that persona. What was most interesting to me, actually, of, again, strategic case study, management case study, operational case study, was listening to the strategic case study examiner at the conference. And one thing that she said was that very often people in their first requirement, they're really struggling to get into their role. By the time they get onto the later requirements, once they get into it, they're really playing that role well. They're analysing. Of course, the strategic case study, it's not very technical, actually. It's very much about business strategy, business analysis, how well you're analysing problems. And she was saying, well, they're really getting into that role, really playing that strategic role at that point. And their answers were so much better. Okay, so what I would urge you to do is to try right from the start to think, right, who am I? What am I trying to do? I'm an operational level management accountant trying to analyze the figures of my business, do some management accounting on my business, and perhaps a bit of financial accounting and perhaps a bit of management analysis, all dependent, of course, on what the requirement is. But play that role, get into it from the start. Talk about yourself as if you're within the business. One thing I see from people when they're sending in their first mocks, they often talk about they do this, they do that, that company does this, because they're not playing the role. They haven't got into the fact that I'm an employee within this business. And it's very, very important that you do that. Just feel part of that business. Of course, you should have analysed the case study and really know that case study. As you're doing that, imagine that you are part of that business. And you do need to use a bit of imagination here, a bit of role play in a sense, because this is what you're doing. You are role playing in the exam. You are playing a role, and your role is within the business. Okay? I mean, can you imagine if you went to watch a film and an actor was actually not playing their role? They were almost acting as if they were outside looking in at that role. Well, they should do this now and they should do that now. That would be really odd, wouldn't it? And that's exactly the same with you. Get into that role. Be that person and your exam script will be better. Okay, so I'll leave the clip just there. I hope you found that useful. Those are the real keys to passing, and even if you don't watch the rest of my 10 hours of videos, what you can always do is, as you're practicing and preparing, you can come back to those criteria to decide, am I achieving that in my mock exams, in my preparation? Always come back to those key lessons, because that really is what it is that the examiner wants you to do to pass. And in fact, much of the rest of my tuition video set is all about how you achieve those key elements. How do you plan properly and prepare properly and write answers out in a way that scores the most marks? How do you go about bringing technical stuff in and applying that? Applying so important, because the examiner thinks that's the key weakness that people have when they're doing their scripts, and so on. So the whole series is focused around how you go about passing. So you can buy that tuition video series just by itself. You can find that on our website, www.astranti.com, or you can buy the whole course, which includes those tuition videos, but a whole load else besides: live masterclasses, mock exams, ethics pack, the marking of mocks, so you get feedback on each script you get. I mean, a whole load of stuff that's really focused on you getting through, you getting a pass. So one way or the other, I hope you find one or two of those products useful. Whatever you decide to do and however you personally decide to prepare, I do wish you the best of luck going forward, and in particular, best of luck on exam day. I hope it's a real success for you.